Kojo, we're ready for the news.
Absolutely. Well, the newspaper headlines.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. That's always very useful. You know, so many people
send me. Today looks. If I was out of studio, this would have been a useful news for me because it looks like many of the.
You can really map your track to work today with that information. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. And well, I've been sprinting through the headlines as quickly as I can.
Some notable ones you would want to talk about, I guess.
No doubt. But why don't we, just first of all run through them quickly. I've got the Ghanaian Times, I'll do the Guide and the Dispatch perhaps, and maybe the Finder. And then I'll leave the rest of them for you. And where to begin? All right, Ghanaian Times is a good place to start. NPP invites NDC for meeting is the banner headline. Of course, we heard about this yesterday. That letter, that long-awaited letter has finally arrived. I know that feeling, in secondary school when you've been writing to some girl and she hasn't responded, and then they announce in the dining hall you've got a letter and it arrives.
Back in the day.
I know how the NDC
you and I sometimes we sound like we're colonialists or pre-independent. Yeah, because right now they don't write letters, they write text messages.
People must wonder how old we are.
So if we're very old actually.
We're the same age as well, aren't we?
Yeah, and we see telegram, right?
Yes.
Where the paper is yours and the stamp is already made for you.
Yes. And then you just write and then fold it up and send it.
And it used to be postcards too.
Yeah.
So whatever love messages you had will be witnessed.
Indeed. You couldn't deny. You couldn't deny at a later date. You can't claim you've been hacked.
Social media on a postcard.
Indeed. All right. Well, so that's the banner headline. NDC has finally received that long-awaited letter. Good for them. NTC vows to pursue police who brutalized 3 journalists. That's a vow that I stand behind. On the back page of the Ghanaian Times, let's have a quick look. Help raise funds to mitigate climate change repercussions. Panelists urge investors. And this is at an investment forum as part of Africa Climate Week. NPA to regulate bitumen. Yeah, that is a petroleum product, isn't it?
Bitumen, yeah.
Right, Daily Guide next, and on the front page this morning of the Daily Guide, NPP invites NDC for vigilante talks. BNI sued for unlawful detention. That's one of the stories I'd like to touch on a bit later. And Asiedun Ketia thrown out again. Let's have a quick look at the back page of the Daily Guide. And Ghanaian athletes have motor qualities. The Vice President has likened Ghanaian athletes, particularly in short distance running, to their Jamaican counterparts. That's what the Vice President said. He said the thin line between Ghanaian athletes and their Jamaican counterparts makes him certain that given the needed support, the sport will put Ghana back on the world stage. Yeah. To be fair, in these 100-meter sprints, even when Usain Bolt participates, the time lag between the winner and the loser is sometimes microseconds.
Yeah, true.
So, yeah, I think we can claim that there is a thin line between us and them. Always. There's always a thin line. And the difference always is conditioning and training. So maybe the Vice President is right about that. Maybe we should look into it. Stars getting ready for Kenya. Black Stars. Rockies holds sports festival. Zwani Lady Captain's prize hits Achimota. I think that's golf, right?
Definitely.
And GTF trains 20 officials. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. Keenly contested golfing event. Yeah. GTF trains 20 officials in second DNSS program, and Ghana Taekwondo Federation is the GTF. That's not an abbreviation people will be able to guess off the top of their heads. But we're always going to the abbreviations and expecting everyone to know what we're talking about, right? Okay, and second DNSS program. Let me find DNSS for you. Development of National Sports Systems.
When did that one to come?
How are we supposed to guess that? Anyway,
I guess this week we've been having a lot of the abbreviations.
Yes.
We started talking about them last week. That we tend to be very much fascinated with the abbreviations. Even when we're going for bonds, we'll find a way of coining an abbreviation for it.
The thing about abbreviations that we don't avail our minds to is that it lends credibility to things. You know, once you give an abbreviation, the suggestion is that so many people know it that just by saying the abbreviation, people know what you're talking about.
That should be the rationale.
Exactly, exactly. So when people hear an abbreviation for an organization or something that they don't know, just because there's an abbreviation, it suggests to their minds that this is a well-known, well-established, you know, entity.
You also did that back in school. You're supposed to chew and pour the...
Yes.
And if you did that, you were good.
Indeed, indeed. This was before Google, obviously.
Yeah.
Hey, we've wasted our time before.
Drawing grasshoppers on board.
Did you study sine and cosine?
Yeah, I did.
Tangented. Oh, gosh. Anyway. The Daily Dispatch has these headlines. Who will come after Akufo-Addo? 4 top choices of 4,000 NPP delegates. Wow. And this is, I suppose this is some sort of survey they've done. And the 4 top choices are Alan Chirmanting, Joe Gatti, Vice President Baumia, and Dan Bochi.
As what?
Successors to the President, Akufo-Addo. It is fascinating, though, to see that now there are 4 names. There was a time when there wasn't any question about it, you know. The Vice President was seen as the successor. You know?
I think especially or immediately after the 2016 general elections and then the first year, it looks like you know, this town, people have their own agenda. So
of course, so you never know why such a story is being put out.
We're reading this, but we're pushing somebody's agenda.
Until we speak to the delegates ourselves, we have no way of confirming whether this is indeed the reality.
It's all part of the... You and I will communicate, so it's part of the means of consistently undertaking some persuasive communication.
That's right.
You keep drumming it becomes Coca-Cola.
Indeed. That's how it works, right?
We'll tell you that one name will never work because over time it's been drummed home.
Yeah.
In the year drums actually, one name will never work. There's an agenda.
Amazing. All right, NPA to commence regulation of bitumen. That's also in the Ghanaian Times, I believe. Now the Finder has this banner headline, very interesting. I will crash impunity. I have a feeling the word is meant to be crush, but I haven't read the story yet, so I'm not going to say that definitively. But that's the headline. I will crash impunity. President assures Ghana Bar Association.
Yeah.
Also on the front page, $3 billion Eurobond, 6 times oversubscribed. The suggestion here is that there is a lot of interest from investors in our bond. So they've oversubscribed 6 times over. It's almost 7 times actually, if you follow the logic that is leading to this headline. But that is interesting. There are many who would have thought that there are a lot of things that investors will be thinking about right now regarding Ghana that would not be positive. But it appears that, well, that hasn't stopped them from oversubscribing.
Yes, we're told. That's a debate for another time.
Yeah.
So
we have to do a bit of analysis of this. I mean, I saw it on Yofi Grant's social media handle.
Actually, there's been a lot of posts on it about oversubscription.
Yeah. Some analysis will be useful.
It's just I found it a bit baffling that we're touting, the raising of bonds as some great achievement, whilst maybe 2-3 years back it was said to be detrimental to growth and development. It was actually a main campaign message, especially for the MPP. But once we can raise these bonds, it shows that we are credit worthy, right?
Well, that's what they're saying to us now. That wasn't what they said to us back then. Indeed. Indeed. Right, give pensioners what is due them. And that's the TUC making that call. And that's it for me, Ronan.
All right, so let me do the daily graphic. On the front page, we have government raises $3 billion in Euro bonds, received orders totaling $21 billion. You have an attached picture or an accompanying picture of the finance minister, Mr. Ken Oforiatta. That's a good one. Government pays 66.8 million Ghana cedi subvention to senior high schools. Due process followed in dismissing lecturers. UEW Governing Council. It was a press conference. We brought that to you the early part of yesterday and subsequently dominated the news throughout Tuesday. On the back page of the Daily Graphic, we have 3 die, 1,800 displays in renewed violence at Chreponi. Sometimes it's a bit sad, the conflict that we tend to have. Well, government also begins distribution of solar lanterns to deprived households. Let's look at the Herald. The Herald has on the front page, Parliament workers angry at Speaker for selling staff buses to cronies. The Herald.
Okay. Sometimes, you know, all you have to do to explain a story is just say the newspaper that it's coming from.
Yeah.
And as soon as you said the Herald, I was like, okay, all right.
It's a tabloid, yeah? It's a pro. Okay, so NACOP plotting to free bastard drug barons. And Rawlings ignores MPP's bad governance again. And guns on his NDC. Mahama sends coded message on infighting to his party. You have it up there. Okay, now let's look at the Informer. The Informer has the story, Akufo-Addo beats retreat, disbanding party militias, accepts NDC proposal for mediators. That's how the Informer decides to take a look at it. So we have other stories as well. Now let's go to the Independent newspaper. The front page of the Independent newspaper, again, the Vice President is always present on the front page of the Independent. Ghana and Guinea to cooperate on bauxite industry development. Second Lady secures Indian scholarships and free care for special pediatric cases. Okay. And then we have the Today newspaper on the front page. We have Rawlings blames NDC for Kopna Ej's death. Front page of the Today newspaper. We have other stories as well. Kukuba Akon, we also have police chief cited in demolition exercise. So that'll be it for the newspapers.
All right. Well, this story in the Daily Guide caught my eye. BNI sued for unlawful detention. And so this is a story of a private citizen who has taken the BNI to court for violating his fundamental human rights. He claims that on the 14th of January 2019, he was arrested by BNI officials. By the way, the man is called Mr. Frank Akule. He's the CEO of Ghana First Company Limited. Ghana First Company Limited. I believe this is a company that operates in sort of the sanitation spheres.
Yes, they build toilets and
right,
some kind of sanitary facilities.
Okay. So he was arrested by the BNI on the 14th of January 2019. He was kept in custody until the 18th of January without officially being charged or being put before any court of competent jurisdiction. So he says that this violates the tenets of Article 33(1) of the Constitution, which says that a suspect must be released either conditionally or unconditionally, or be produced before a court of competent jurisdiction within 48 hours. Now, we all know of this law, but he is saying that it was violated when he was picked up in January. So he's taking them to court, and it's interesting because this is a violation of the law. You would imagine that if we were in a system that worked, you could actually report this to the police, and whichever officers of the BNI broke the law could be tried for it. But in this country, you have to go the civil route if you want any sort of...
Some redress.
Yes, redress to a situation like this. But it's very interesting because the BNI has a reputation for this. You remember under the previous administration when those 3 individuals were picked up, those 3 men from South Africa who apparently were engaged in some sort of training exercise with NPP.
At the time.
People who we have to describe as vigilante groups now, yeah. So they were here to train vigilantes. But they were picked up by the BNI, taken to court. But unfortunately, there wasn't enough of a case to hold them, and they were the court ordered that they be released. The BNI
subsequently deported straight away.
Yes, the BNI simply refused to obey the court's order and kept them locked up. Now, for me, I was scandalized, not necessarily because I thought these individuals were good people or they were here for a good cause or a purpose. No. But the violation of a court always scares me. It always terrifies me because, hey, if you can violate a court, then what can't you do? What can't you do? And so following that, I don't know if you recall, but this happened in March. So following that, in April of that year, we staged a stunt on the Super Morning Show where we pretended that I had been picked up by national security while I was hosting the show. It was on the 1st of April, so it was an April Fool's stunt. And everybody who, almost literally everybody who heard it believed it. Believed that, yes, the national security BNI could walk into a studio of a radio station and pick up the host while he's hosting the show and go and lock him up. They actually believed that could happen.
And it's all because of the history of the precedent.
Indeed. Indeed. So the BNI has a bit of a reputation to clean up. I mean, the purpose that they serve in our society is obvious. It's clear. It's important. They are important to us. But they can't appear to be above the law. It is scary to think of that they can do this and get away with it. You know, I wonder what will come of this man's lawsuit, whether he will win on the merits or not. But to be perfectly honest, it is the sort of thing that they need to be reversing when it comes to their reputation.
I guess the BNI, because of its historical antecedent, and especially within the period when we had the PNDC and the military rule that extended for about, if not nine years, before we entered democracy for the Fourth Republic, and subsequently throughout the way it's been operating. It has a certain mark or a certain history by which it's been judged by, and it looks like it's not been able to check itself of those sorts of perceptions based on its own actions. And especially when we say we're operating a certain democratic dispensation, I believe that the reforms that are needed for other quasi intelligence bodies that tend to work for Ghana's own national security and interests, they also need to make sure they clean up the act so that there's some level of conformance based on what we're practicing and saying that we're preaching. And so that is also in alignment with what exists elsewhere in the world. Indeed, we don't have the equivalent of the CIA, but the BNI will be the equivalent of the FBI, and they take care of homeland security and some of those. There's even in the US a whole minister or somebody who is responsible for it, and it's something we have to think about. What do we want to do with such a body? In such a way that its actions and activities is not shrouded in that level of secrecy. Because even in the US, where we've had the CIA, etc., undertake some of these covert operations, they tend to release their files subsequently for the civil society to make a judgment of it. And subsequently, people have even taken cases. And if we take the CIA or even the MI6 or the MI5, we've had individuals who feel that their rights have been infringed, take them to court. And I believe that what the gentleman has done, it's in order. Sometimes we need to test the law to see whether our institutions really are acting within the space for which we say that we're practicing our dispensation.
Now, you see, we have the mechanism. We have it in place to do what we see in the United States. We just don't use that mechanism. So in the United States, they have constant accountability. So like you said, the CIA, which is a covert institution and doesn't actually have a mandate to act on American soil. They act, only in international theaters. Even they, with their covert nature, have to account to a committee of Congress,
of their legislature, of the Senate usually.
Of the Senate, thank you. And this is constant. I mean, if they want to spend money on something, they have to come and account to this committee. It's in camera, so the public don't get to hear about it. But you have to go to representatives of the people and convince them that this action is warranted. If you go and conduct some operation somewhere and unseat some government, you have to make sure that it's all approved. You can't just act covertly and get away with it, never have to account for it.
I agree with you.
But here in Ghana, we have a parliamentary committee. But we have a parliament that is such a slave to the executive that, to be perfectly honest, there is no point even setting up the arrangement. The National Security Minister, by our constitution, is supposed to give account to Parliament once a year. He hasn't done it for 2 years. And he's still there, he's still in office. The president still keeps him in position because the president clearly hasn't seen anything wrong with this violation of the constitution.
Yeah, it's something we have to think about. And before we go on to myjoyonline.com, I guess the story...
By the way, violating the constitution is grounds for impeachment.
Ideally.
Just saying.
Ideally. By impeaching, it's also a big step in many of the democracies that are practiced around the world. Not that it hasn't happened in some of the top ones. So
no, I'm not saying that should happen.
Be the
I'm
order
just
of the day.
illustrating the seriousness of violating the constitution.
And the repercussions
Indeed. Yes. So unless the president can prove that he's not aware that his minister has not reported to Parliament as the constitution says he must, unless he can prove that he's not aware, somehow he's the only Ghanaian who doesn't know this has happened, then we have a problem.
Before we go on to myjoyonline.com, this is good news. Government raising $3 billion in euro bonds. It also shows that the investors have some confidence in the economy. It's good. Even though I think it's at variance to what we had espoused or touted around about how we needed to move from the Gajisbergian economy, in which our fundamentals are always not good, because what you and I are wearing, the leather that's used for the shoes are from outside Ghana. Everything around that shoe is from outside Ghana. The pricing we don't dictate, we don't indicate, and so we have difficulties in that. And so we're saying we're happy that these subscriptions or oversubscription is good for the economy, but ultimately, by the time that these subscriptions tend to run out and the maturity dates of these bonds tend to arrive or are recorded, then we have the capital flight. And then the CD ultimately tends to suffer. And that's what we're facing with some of the difficulties with our currency currently. And Professor Peter Quartey is advising that he, however, observed that strong appetite for foreign debt could impact negatively on the debt stock of the country, and also increase capital flight in the long term or long run.
Absolutely. These are things to keep an eye on. So before we celebrate some sort of win by having an oversubscribed bond, let's also look through the entire process and see whether we will end up at an advantage or a disadvantage.
Choices are good, but they always have consequences.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let's look at myjoyonline.com.
Yeah, let's do that quickly. And a number of stories. NPA to commence regulation of bitumen. We've mentioned that earlier, and we can see why that's important. Let's see what else we've got. Cedi depreciation, Akufo-Addo blames taste for imported goods. Okay. So it's not mismanagement of the economy, it's not any of those things, it's taste for imported goods. All right, Chereponi conflict is escalating. Security analysts call for firm action. The fundamentals of the Ghanaian cedi. The depreciation of the Ghanaian cedi has now become a perennial crisis, according to this opinion piece. Go read it, check it out. 3 young Ghanaians launch project to bridge ICT gap for rural children. Good for them. Nice, this is impressive. St. Rose's crashed in National Science and Maths quiz, regional contest. Oh, commiserations with St. Rose's friends. Chereponi humanitarian crisis worsens as displaced residents hit 1,800. So yes, indeed, it is escalated, isn't it? JoyNews' Justice Beidou heads to LA Times as 2019 Press Partners Fellowship winner. Justice Beidou.
I love the way he's dressed. Very Ghanaian smock.
Absolutely.
Like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes, and that will keep him warm.
Ghana's ambassador to the US, LA Times. Congratulations.